As we mentioned earlier, President Trump will be in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina tonight, campaigning for Senator Darline Graham. For this race, I want to bring in Nick Reynolds. He is a politics reporter for the South Carolina-based Post and Courier. Nick, it's great to have you here. Give my audience a sense of where this race is. As I was on the phone today talking to several Republicans in South Carolina who told me it's very close and there's internal polling that Ralph Norman has and that the Darline Graham campaign have. They're not disclosing that shows Norman with a little bit of a lead.
Yeah, and that's what's made this so interesting. This is one of the most scrutinized races in the nation, which is really surprising given the fact that really, this is a deep red Republican state. But, the state has really had a legacy of punching above its weight in Senate and Congress for years. And so the fact that there's been so little out there publicly right now is very, very interesting. But there was an event the other day in Columbia. It's this usual business showcase where, in the state capitol, you see most of the lobbyists, most of the major industry groups gather there. And Ralph Norman actually happened to be speaking there along with several other members of the congressional delegation. And in the crowd, it did seem to feel like all of the momentum in this race was going toward Norman right now. People were discussing some of these polls. There was numbers ranging everywhere from him being up by 6 points to nearing double digits, which is really surprising given the fact that he's been outspent astronomically. Even though there's been some political action support behind him, most of the money coming into this has been toward Darline Graham. If you go through our FEC reports, you're seeing some of the richest people in South Carolina and the United States at large supporting her. There have even been some outside groups that are not related to South Carolina Republican politics at all, attempting to prop her up and go against Ralph Norman. So it's been a really interesting race to see, and the fact that there hasn't been a lot publicly released about the state of the race has definitely been very interesting.
So, Nick, two questions. First, there was an Emerson poll before the original primary that said about 53% of South Carolinians said that a Trump endorsement would not move them one way or the other. Do we still believe that's true? And question two, help my audience understand the geography of South Carolina. The president will be in southern South Carolina. Ralph Norman's base, as I understand it, more northern South Carolina.
Yeah, and this is a really, really interesting dynamic to see because this isn't the first time that the President Trump has gotten involved in South Carolina's politics. If you'll recall back in the governor's race, he actually endorsed rather late in the game, backing Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette ahead of her eventual runoff campaign against Attorney General Alan Wilson. If you looked on the ground here, Evette boasted really, really close ties to the White House. Her staff largely worked with Trump on his 2020 and 2024 ground game here in South Carolina. So she inherited a lot of his alums, basically predicated the entire race on getting that endorsement. She ultimately got it. The issue was that they were running against a campaign that just had much stronger fundamentals and a much stronger connection to the state than she did. Ultimately, that resulted in a pretty large loss come the runoff time. We also saw it a little bit earlier this year with a special session for redistricting. The president pushed very hard to draw our Democratic Congressman Jim Clyburn out of his seat. The legislature, I don't necessarily want to say it was a rebuke of the president, but they ultimately decided to go in another direction. So, the president's influence, it's important here. The endorsement does matter. He is still very popular here, but there is a sort of independent streak here that, really, comes to define the race and probably will carry on, through the rest of this. And you're going to see that with the map to your second question. Is Horry County, where the rally is being held right now, is part of this broader region called the Grand Strand and PD. So the Grand Strand is mostly based around Myrtle Beach. That's a really, really conservative area, of course, but it's also mostly a transplant area. And, it's a very MAGA crowd, but, they're not necessarily moved as much by some of the hyper-regionalism as you see in the rest of the state. Now, that area went toward Congressman Russell Fry in the first round of voting, and he had already endorsed Darline Graham. It's expected a lot of the vote is probably going to go toward her. She finished second in the region. That's probably going to be a safe bet for her. The interesting part that we're going to be seeing is the rest of his congressional district, which is the PD, which is a little bit more independent. It's largely rural. There's still some outcrops of Democratic support there from just the old guard that used to define politics here. That'll be one to watch. Upstate South Carolina, where Norman's base is, that's more evangelical. They tend to stray more conservative. It's actually one of the areas that's consistently voted against Lindsey Graham when he was in office, even though he carried about 56% of the vote in the primary earlier this year. He lost both Greenville and Spartanburg counties, which are the main population centers of the region.
Nick Reynolds, I appreciate the time and the expertise very much. Thank you.